Now, when it comes to reading the documentation, you may feel like Kylo here, and you know what you have to do, but you don't know if you have the strength to do it. Well, unlike Kylo, I like to read the manual, and because I have repeatedly misled you through simplification, you're going to have to read the manual to know how things actually work. So it is time to learn the fascinating truth. It is time to read the fun manual. All right, reading the fun manuals, where do you get them, first of all? Well, of course, they were included in your class materials, but going forward, because things couldn't change and because this class was built on the 2019 version of the manual, which I would hope and expect will be updated soon, you're going to want to consult with this URL in the future to find the unprivileged specification and the privileged specification. Unprivileged is what this class is all about, and privileged is what a future class like Architecture 2005 would be about, in the same way that Architecture 2001 is about OS internals for x86. 2005 will be about OS internals for RISC-V. And you can also find many of the not yet ratified but mostly final specifications linked to from that page as well. The basic outline of the table of contents for the document that was provided for this class is going to look something like this. We start with the RV32i and include the zfency, MA, ZICSR, F&D, or I prefer MAFD, and zfency and ZICSR, and those comprise the RV32G general purpose instruction set. Then you can also circle the following to get the RV64G version. So you have the RV64i plus zfency, ZICSR, and MAFD. If you scroll down, you can also find the C standard extension for compressed instructions, which we covered some of, but not all of the possible compressed instructions. And if you forget what exactly goes into your RV32 or 64G, that is mentioned down in this section. Okay, so I said that my data that I gave you in this class is fundamentally a simplification and it's misleading, so you need to read the manual to know what's true. Here's what I said, but the truth is, like this. Look at that. That's ridiculous. The manual is so complicated. Oh, wait, hold on a second. Yeah, that's Intel. That's x86. Okay, what the manual says is like this. And, well, actually compared to x86, that's pretty nice. Like, that's not a whole lot of stuff about add-I. It's just a little, couple sentences, 3 sentences, and some description of how the instruction's encoding. That's actually pretty nice. That makes me feel happy. So, here's what we can get out of this basic description of an assembly instruction like add-I. First of all, you'll see something like this, and there will be multiple instructions all together, and it's basically saying they're all encoded in a similar fashion. But when we read the description, it says add-I adds the sign extended 12-bit immediate, and you can find the 12-bit immediate mentioned right here. And what it's fundamentally giving you is the 32-bit encoding of the add-I instruction. So bits 20 through 31 of that 32 bits that encode add-I are going to be the sign extended 12-bit immediate. Then what you can see is that that immediate is added to the value that is stored in register RS1. So this is register source 1. And it says the arithmetic overflow is ignored, so if you add the two together and it's too big for a 64-bit or 32-bit value, if it's too big for the register, oh well, too bad. It just ignores that in this instruction. It doesn't go set any flags or other bits anywhere else. It would be up to the compiler to generate code that checks for whether an overflow would occur before the addition is actually done, if the code actually cares about or depends upon the result of an overflow occurring. And then the result is simply the low xlang bits of the result, because basically anything that overflows is ignored, and you just keep the lower xlang bits. And you can see here that the manual is defining things in terms of xlang. This is your hint that this instruction add-I can operate in xlang equal to 32, xlang equal to 64, or in the future xlang equal to 128, for instance. And that destination register is right here, RD. So that's pretty good. The couple of sentences give us a description of what's going on with this IM12, this RS1, and the RD. but it doesn't tell us, for instance, how we can use these bits, RS1 or RD. They appear to be 5 bits, like because this was 12 and this is 5. So it appears to be 5 bits, and actually it's exactly 5 bits because you can say 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. 5 bits encode the source register, 5 bits encode the destination register. So it doesn't tell us yet what those 5 bits, how those are used, and it also doesn't tell us what this opcode is. But we'll be describing that later on when we talk about instruction encoding and decoding. So now I want to just jump into the manual with you, and I want to walk through it a little bit to hopefully make you feel more comfortable, because the goal is after this class for you to be comfortable and able to continue on your own and to be able to read the fun manual. Okay, so there's the table of contents that we already talked about, but let's just, start with the RV32I and walk through it. One of the first things it says, Programmer's Model for Base Integer ISAs, talks about xlang and the registers. So we already talked about that. There are 32 general purpose registers plus the program counter, and they are xlang wide. So not that interesting. And a lot of the times this italic bit in the manual is lots of just interesting sort of architectural choices and asides. There's just kind of side comments that they put in there to explain some things, but sometimes they're kind of a little bit premature. Like all of a sudden it's telling you about particular assembly instructions, which if you're just reading top to bottom, you have never ever seen before. But regardless, it's still, somewhat useful. Then it starts talking about base instruction formats. So one of the first things it talks about is how instructions are encoded. But again, like if you're new to it, you don't care yet. You just want to see the assembly instructions first, or at least we do, us software types. Maybe a hardware person actually cares about this. Maybe they care about how complicated the instruction fetch decode cycle is, stuff like that, but we don't. They just talk about a bunch of different encodings, and they mean absolutely nothing to us because we really don't care until we find some assembly instructions. So great, a whole bunch of stuff we don't care about. But finally, by section 2.4, we get to integer computation instructions. And once again, it talks about some instructions that you can't necessarily have ever seen before in your life. If this is the first time you're just, jumping into RISC-V, had you not taken this class, had you not seen all of these instructions already, this would be kind of annoying that you're jumping in here and it's talking about all these instructions that don't mean anything to you. But then once you get down to about here, this is where we see the stuff that we already covered in the screenshots and stuff. This is the idea of there will be multiple instructions. They will all have a similar encoding. And then below this collection of instructions, we will see the descriptions of how they work. And usually it's only a few sentences. And this tends to make me feel like, at least when I was starting, it felt like, okay, great, it's terse, it's not giant manual, but it sometimes left things a little ambiguous, and I had to go out and write assembly instructions, as you'll find in the next section, to actually clear up what the ambiguity was. So here again, it's talking about add-I. Then we can have this set if less than immediate, and immediate unsigned. Then we have the Andy, Ori, and Zori. And all of these just have our general descriptions of how they work. Frequently, they will also include like little mentions of, okay, well, add-I RDRS0 is used to implement the move assembler instruction. Or this salt IU with 1 as the source 2 is going to implement the set if equal to 0. And we didn't actually see that pseudo instruction in our class. There will be a table of all the various pseudo instructions elsewhere in the class, in the manual. So if we wanted to search for that, for instance, set EQZ, then we could find that elsewhere. And this has a bunch of different RISC-V pseudo instructions. So sometimes, if you would have seen set EQZ or neg W or neg, things like that, you would have searched the manual and you would have perhaps found them here in the pseudo instructions table, or you may have seen them elsewhere in the manual, such as being mentioned in the context of the instruction that is used behind the scenes. So just continuing to walk through here, we've got now some of our shifts. We've got silly, surly, and S-ray. Moving on, we got Louis and WPC. They will mention in the instruction like, hey, this uses the U-type format, but you don't really care and you don't want to go back and like consult with the U-type format, that's not really useful to us. Like all that's useful is just being able to read this thing right here. I don't care if it's a U-type format. It's just I need to know what the opcode is. I need to know how to specify the 5 bits of the destination register, and I need to know that these upper 20 bits are the upper 20 bits that are going to be used in a LUI or a WPC. So yeah, like basically you don't need to memorize, even though you will see them repeatedly saying this is a U-type, this is an I-type, this is a B-type. You really don't care. Like you just need to be able to read these things right here. So moving on, we have now some of our adds and ands and XORs and some more shifts. So you can see this is a motley collection of multiple different things, and until we actually know how to interpret these funct3 and the opcode and other stuff, we won't actually know like what differentiates an add from a salt U. Like they are all on the same line, and why are they all on the same line? Once we see the actual instruction encoding, that will perhaps make a little more sense. So again, just some instructions up here. Then we've got the no-op instruction given its own special place, but told that this is actually an add-I. Control transfer, meaning jumps and then subsequently branches. We will have the JAL, the jump and link, and that will be described by this, and we'll have to learn how to read that. And then we've got the JALer, the jump and link register, described by this. So similar, but not exactly the same. We've got a much bigger immediate here, right? We said JALer had only a 12-bit immediate, whereas JAL had a 21-bit immediate. So the 0th bit, this was a thing that was scaled by 2, and so the uppermost bit being 20 means that it's actually index 20, so bit 21. And so if we scale back, we can see that here it doesn't actually use the keyword of scaled by 2. It says multiples of 2. So it's a little inconsistent sometimes in the documentation about whether it says multiples of x or scaled by x. But as we learned elsewhere in the class, just, when you don't see a 0th bit encoded anywhere in things, then that just means the 0th bit must be 0, and it's not specified in the instruction encoding, but it's implicitly 0, and therefore you can have 0 or 2 or 4, etc., values that always have the bit 0 equal to 0. All right, so continuing on past all of the, and so again, this is why you need to read the instructions. Like there's all sorts of guidance, there's all sorts of best practices, and I just really simplified things down in this class to avoid complexity for as long as we can before we ultimately have to learn how to read and understand the full complexity via the manual, not via me explaining every single bit to you. Then after the JAL and JALer, we've got our branches, and you can see like these are all the branches. We covered all the assembly instructions. There's no other branch types that are available in RISC-V. This is it. So those are all the branches. Scaling down, whole bunch of extra information about which way that conditional branches should jump. Should they jump forward versus backwards? All having to do with branch prediction and stuff like that, and their best practices. Then we get the load and store instructions, and we know that we had loads for loads words, loads bytes, loads half words. And this is again where sometimes the shorter version may feel a little underspecified because it'll talk about how the load word instruction works and how the half word instruction works. But then sometimes you'll have these terse like LB and LBU are defined analogously for 8-bit values. So you need to make sure that you really understand like how some of these bigger value using instructions work so that you can see how they are defined analogously. Well, sometimes you may still have ambiguity there, and you may have to just go off and write an assembly instruction to confirm that it behaves the way you expect. All right, and continuing on, we will eventually hit our memory ordering or the fence instruction. So I said that there was a much more complicated version of fence that has to do with whether you're dealing with device input, device output, memory reads, and memory writes. And the fence basically can actually specify like what kind of ordering you want the things to use. And so you have to read all of this to get the actual full description. I said just use fence, and just use fence will essentially set all of these bits so that it's maintaining the ordering of all device input, output, reads, and writes. And so yeah, then, those are our last few instructions. We got the fence, and then we got the environment call and breakpoints. And then that's basically everything. Now, I want to make a point about, like, that's the, 32-bit stuff. There's a little bit about hints, and I don't care about the hints here, so I'm just going to skip that. You can read that if you're interested. I just want to make a point that that was all the 32-bit stuff. 64-bit stuff essentially is all 4 pages. Like 4 pages is all it takes to describe the superset of 64-bit stuff. And so it's only those W suffix things, right? We only had 15 new assembly instructions. The W suffix things like add IW, the silly W, but then also the silly, which we talked about earlier. This has 6 bits rather than 5 bits for the shift amount, and that's why it's a new assembly instruction. But yeah, it's like pretty short. Sometimes they include some stuff like LUIs and WePCs, but then it says this uses the same opcode as the RV32i, so it's not actually different, and I'm not really sure why they included it when they didn't include all the other stuff. Right, then other operations, like there's some things like sil and surl and sra, but those are ultimately just actually going to be encoded exactly the same as the 32-bit version. Didn't really need to be included here. So then we've got instructions like sil and surl and sra, and the only reason they're included here is just to confirm that in RV64i, it's only going to use the lower 6 bits, because now we're dealing with 64-bit registers, of the source 2. So yeah, then we've got our load and store, which in the context of 64-bit are going to be load and store dword. And then we're down to hints. So that's it. Basically 4 pages for the only stuff you need to know for 64-bit. So that certainly is much nicer than something like x86. All right, let's go back and look at some specific examples that I plucked out that I think are interesting from the manual.